Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 7th of October of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start, and first let's talk about the Crimea and the Black Sea. If you remember, during the previous few days we were talking a lot about the Russian missile and drone strikes over the entire Odessa region. As a result of attack, the Russians managed to destroy a few commercial ships that Ukrainians were using. According to the Russians, they were using them as cargoes for military munition and equipment. Also, we have few explosions on the territory of Odessa, and the most important, we have the significant number of explosions along the ports and the towns and the cities along the river of Nyva. So, as we discussed, the Russians were trying to destroy most likely the Western missiles, long-range missiles that Ukrainians were planning to use to attack deep inside the territory of Russia. We suppose that Ukrainians are going to begin attacks deep inside the territory of Russia after the 12th of October, after the end of the Ramstein summit, but Ukrainians began using them earlier. The thing is that today, on the 7th of October, is the birthday of the President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. So that's why the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian facilities, military objects, infrastructure in the Odessa region with the purpose to avoid the situation, to prevent the situation when the Ukrainians attack the different objects on the territory of Russia during the Vladimir Putin birthday. But anyway, despite the fact that the Russians did everything they could, the Ukrainians managed to break through the Russian air defense, and as a result of a missile strike during the previous night from the 6th on the 7th of October, the Ukrainians destroyed a very big and huge fuel depot that is located on the territory of the town by the name of Feodosia. Furthermore, we have additional videos. For example, in this video we can see the drone that was flying above the area after the missiles arrived. As you can see, the Ukrainians managed to do significant damage. This is not something that maybe the Ukrainians were expecting or waiting, but anyway, this is at least something. Furthermore, the Russians were expecting this attack because, according to information we have from the night from the 6th on the 7th of October, the Russians removed their caliber carriers from port towns and in Novorossiysk, in Crimea, and send those ships in the Black Sea, trying to avoid missile strikes on the military facilities on the territory of the military ports. So this is normal, regular practice. I'm reminded that Iran, for example, are doing the same before any attack from Israeli or from the Western countries. Iran also removes their ships and their fleets from the port cities and port towns, port infrastructure, trying to reduce the damage that Israel and Western countries can deal. So the Russians are doing the same, nothing special. So the 7th of October hasn't ended yet. So maybe by the time you're going to watch the video, they are going to be already 8th of October. Anyway, we expect for additional missile strikes from Ukraine. Maybe not on the territory of Crimea. Maybe the Ukrainians would attack the territory of old Russia. Now let's move to the situation on the ground, and we have a lot of very interesting updates. And first, we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Zolota and Nyva. The pro-Ukrainian sources this morning, somewhere at 8 a.m. of the local time, published information that today the armed force of Russian Federation tried to jump into Zolota and Nyva on the 6 armored vehicles, but then the Russians retreated. This information was published by pro-Ukrainian sources this morning, and so everybody was waiting for additional videos or geolocations that can confirm this, and the Russians shown us of the video. In this video that was published today, somewhere at 11 a.m. of the local time, we can see the process of how the Russians were attacking the Ukrainian positions in the territory of Zolota and Nyva. We can see the significant number of armored vehicles. Indeed, the Russians were using 6 armored vehicles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vehicles that were heading from the village of Prichistovka in the direction of the village of Zolota and Nyva, and in the final minutes we can see the Russian vehicles were moving in the southern part of the village, and in the final seconds of the video we can see a Russian soldier that was waving with the Russian flag. So this is the situation. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps, and summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the village of Zolota and Nyva was captured by the Russians as a result of offensive operation. And the most important, point. As you might could see from the video, the Ukrainians didn't show any resistance to the Russian forces. And the Russians, by this attack, managed to establish complete control over every single settlement that goes along the river of Kashlygach. We are talking about Zolota Nyva, Prichistovka, Pavlovka, Mikolska. Now the Russians can move further in the northern and the northwestern direction with the purpose to take under control Velika Novoselovka, Shakhtarskaya, Novoukrainka, Bogoyavlenka, and Katerynivka. As for Bogoyavlenka, the sources are saying that the situation there is very difficult. The Ukrainians haven't finished the rotation of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade. The Ukrainian military authorities decided not to save this brigade, but they decided to destroy the brigade completely, and they ordered them to take their positions in the village of Bogoyavlenka. And the Russians are bombing and attacking this territory heavily, trying to improve their positions. As for the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, we have additional reports about the situation in the entire group. Today, the Russian sources published the video on how they destroyed the temporary positions of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade in the city of Pavlograd. So maybe the Ukrainians were planning to bring additional reinforcement through the city of Pavlograd in the South Donetsk direction, but the Russians managed to discover the temporary deployment point, and as a result of Iskander strike, that temporary deployment point was destroyed. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kurakhove direction. As you can see, we have a lot of icons. With flags, so let's discuss everything in details. First, let's talk about the village of Maximilianovka. The pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their position significantly. And according to pro-Ukrainian sources, currently the control over Maximilianovka is 50-50. 50% the western and the northwestern part is in the complete Ukrainian control, and 50% is in the complete Russian control. So summarizing everything, as I understand, currently the Russians control everything along this red line. So everything in the eastern and the southeastern direction is under complete Russian control. The rest is under Ukrainian. So the Russians are moving. Most likely during this upcoming week, the Russians will be able to take everything under control and to maintain the line between the village of Ostrovska and Maximilianovka itself, and to establish most likely this line of combat contact within the next week. Now let's move further. We have additional changes on the ground between this town of Gornyak, the village of Zhelana Druga, and the northwestern part of Krasnogorovka. During the previous 24 hours, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take under control these fields. The Russians are pushing and the Ukrainians are retreating. Now let's talk about Gornyak and Kurakhovskaya Cauldron. We've been discussing this situation for a very long period of time. Almost every single day we were talking about additional gains of the armed forces of Russian Federation, how the situation become critical for the Ukrainians and become worse and worse from day to day. And today is not an exception. As to compare the situation yesterday with the current status, the Ukrainians currently is in a very, very bad situation. Mainly the Russians are moving in and are improving their positions in the vicinity of Tsukurna. So it's something like the flower of Tsukurna that is actively blooming right now. So currently nobody has any doubts that the village of Tsukurna was captured by the Russians completely. This information was confirmed by both by pro-Ukrainian mappers, by pro-Russian mappers, and by neutral mappers. The Ukrainians have their presence just in the farms and the barracks in the western part. This is the only positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, but we got this information probably 20 hours ago. Maybe by the end of the 7th of October, everything will change and the Russians will take the entire village under complete control. But this is not the most important information. The most important updates are coming from the line between the villages of Kremenная Balka, Novoselidovka, and Izmailovka. Today we have some changes on the ground according to mainly pro-Russian resources. Neither pro-Ukrainian resources or neutral resources have adjusted their maps in this area, just the Russian resources. And let's discuss these changes on the ground in details. So once again, if we summarize everything that have already announced pro-Russian resources and pro-Russian mappers, the Russian forces during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions along the railways, to take under control this part of the railways, to move further in the southern direction, to take under control around 80% of this tree line to connect their positions with the foothold, with the Russian foothold in the southeastern part of Hrodivka, and move further in the eastern direction and to take under control first buildings and first constructions in the village of Izmailovka. So everything in this red line, between these red lines in the Russian controlled territory, is under complete Russian control. So this is the situation, and obviously this is a very, very bad piece of news for the Ukrainians. Yet we haven't received anything that can confirm this, neither geolocations or nor updates of different reliable mappers. But anyway, I believe that in a day or in a two we're going to receive confirmations from these resources as well. So now let's discuss the cauldron, Gornyak Kurakhovskaya cauldron. And as you can see, during the previous 24 hours we received a significant number of updates along the main supply road between the city of Kurakhove, Berestki, Ilyinka, and then further in the eastern directions towards Kurakhovka. 4 geolocations, even more than 5 geolocations that show us the significant number of FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian vehicles. And we've been discussing this situation almost every single day since the beginning of October. But as for the 7th of October, today we see a very, very huge progress in Russian FPV drone attacks in this territory. I'll try to explain to you and you will be shocked. So let's take a look at this video. This is the first evidence that show us that Ukrainians are in a very, very bad situation. It's already a real cauldron, and most likely the Ukrainians lost any possibilities to evacuate or to escape this territory. Obviously, up to 3,000 or 4,000 soldiers were encircled, and there's just one way for them to surrender or to stay there forever. So what is so special and what is so interesting exactly in this video? Let's take a look at this video once again since the beginning. In the first part of the video, we can see a Russian FPV drone that was hunting the Ukrainian vehicle, and as a result of FPV drone attack, the vehicle was damaged and destroyed. And now we are coming to the second part of the video. We see the same place, we see the same vehicle that was just destroyed by a Russian FPV drone, and we see that 1 minute later, when the first drone attacked the vehicle, the Russians turned on the video from the second drone that was flying, attack drone. This is very important, not just a regular drone, but this is the second attack drone that was flying above the same area and was checking the results of work of first FPV drone. So as you can see, this video confirms that the number of drones that are flying in this area is I don't know even the number, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of drones already flying above these villages, and they can replace each other. If one attack, in a minute the second one arrives in the same area and check the results of work. And the thing is that this is not the one case in the Gornyak Kurakhovka direction. For example, in this video we can see the same story. One Russian drone was flying to attack a convoy that was running away from a cauldron. As a result of attack of first drone, this bus was damaged and destroyed, and a second later the second drone was turned on and he was checking the results of FPV drone attack. So you see, there are hundreds of drones, not just like one drone came to area, attack, did his job, then in an hour the second drone arrived. No, there are hundreds of drones that that flies above this area 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are hundreds, and they replace each other. If your battery is low and you haven't found any target, then most likely the Russians return the drone back home and they replace him with another one. So the Russians are in this area for 24 hours a day, and they can replace each other. They can check the results of work without any problems. So let's take a look at this video. The Russians were attacking this drone, but probably in this video there was no video with the confirmation, so maybe this is just like an exception. And we have the significant number of video from the settlement of Berestki. Once again, this is the video. For example, in the first part of the video we can see how the Russians managed to destroy one vehicle, most likely as a result result of first drone attack, and the second drone was flying further and attacked the second vehicle that was moving also in the same direction. So this is the story. Hundreds of drones and no chances for the Ukrainians to escape this cauldron. But the most important, currently nobody talks about this. Maybe the Ukrainians are trying to, let's say, avoid the situation with panic. But the question is why the Russians are not talking about this, because this can deal the significant damage to Ukrainians and to the soldiers on the ground by destroying their willing to fight and to resist completely. Now let's talk about the original Pokrovsk direction. We have very interesting updates from this territory. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Hrodivka. Today this information was provided by the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation. They confirmed complete control over the settlement, and some Russian soldiers on the ground, some Russian groups on the ground published the video of how the Russian drone was flying above the territory and filming the situation on the ground. As you can see, the village was completely reduced to ruins, and the most important probably that the author was trying to show us is that there is no Ukrainians spotted on the territory of the settlement. But I have finished with this video completely, and during the video the Russians haven't shown us even a single moment with the Russian flag, just the drone flying above the settlement, and that's it. Anyway, this is enough. The Minister of Defense report is enough to make the changes on the ground, and we have made these changes. And if we compare the updates, this is the situation on the 6th of October, and this is the situation and configuration of map on the 7th of October. The Russians finished with the settlement. Furthermore, different mappers also confirmed this information. Now let's move further. As for the city of Toretsk, we haven't received anything special, as well as from the city of Chasiv Yar. As for the Siversk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received a significant number of artillery strikes on Ukrainian positions from the river of Seversky Donetsk to the territory and the outskirts of Siversk. Lots of artillery strikes. The Russians are preparing the foothold, are preparing the direction before further offensive operation. And now let's talk about the Kupiansk direction, and first we're going to talk about the southern Kupiansk. During the previous few days, the Russians carried out the significant, very huge offensive operation towards the village of Tarskoye, but according to pro-Ukrainian sources, that attack was repelled by the Ukrainians. At least we have video that confirmed this. In this video we can see several FPV drone attacks on Russian vehicles and tanks that were trying to break in through the Russian defense belt, but most of them were destroyed. So we don't know for sure the results of that attack, but maybe the Russians managed to improve their positions. But anyway, we're going to receive updates in the very near future. Now let's talk about the northern Kupiansk direction, and the situation for the Ukrainians in this part of the line of combat contact is very difficult as well. The Russians managed to improve their positions to the north of Peshane. The video was provided by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing with the multiple launch rocket systems Russian positions in this intersection of the three lines. Based on this video and based on the claims of the author of this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. The Ukrainian author was saying that the Ukrainians were bombing Russian positions in this area, so we have adjusted the map. As for the river of Oskol, we haven't received anything. On the 6th of October, the Russians managed to get very close to the river and to the settlements along the river, but after another 24 hours, we haven't received anything. But anyway, the situation for the Ukrainians is very difficult because despite the fact that the Russians haven't managed to reach the river of Oskol and to cut the main supply roads physically, the Ukrainians are no longer able to use them. So we are talking about this part of road. So this road that goes from Sinkovo to Krugliakovka, and then from Krugliakovka in the northern direction to Kolesnikovka and Glushkovka, the Ukrainians are no longer able to use. And the Ukrainians can't use this road, local road as well, because a few days ago the Russians destroyed the bridge in this area. So this road the Ukrainians can't use. So that's why if the Ukrainians needs to bring additional forces and reinforcements to the northern Kupiansk direction, they need to take them from the southern part, as we discussed in the previous videos, to move them on the western bank of the river of Oskol, then to move in the northern direction, and then once again to cross the river of Oskol in the eastern direction. The Russians understand this, so that's why during the previous 24 hours the Russians mainly were focused on attacking the Ukrainian vehicles along the main supply roads. For example, in this video we can see the Ukrainian Max Pro that's stacked on another crossing, river crossing, and the Russians destroyed this Max Pro as a result of Lancet strike. So this is the things that the Russians were doing. A little bit further in the northern direction, the Russians attacked with a missile Ukrainian supply route with the FAB or with the missile, trying to reduce Ukraine logistics. So this is the things that the Russians are doing right now, trying to exhaust the Ukrainians that are currently located in the northern Kupiansk direction. As for Vovchansk, we got reports that the Russians managed to restore control over the 50% of the aggregate plant. This video was published today by the Russian sources. I'll remind you that 2 days ago the Ukrainians, as a result of counteroffensive, managed to force the Russians to fall back, and a few weeks after, the Russians restored their lost positions. And as for the Sudzha and as for the Kursk directions, we haven't received anything, nothing special, just a regular activity. The only interesting updates are coming from the village of Lyubimovka. This video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and in this video we can see the work of Ukrainian FPV drones that were attacking the Russian forces on the territory of the eastern Lyubimovka. This is a very important video because the line of combat contact, according to most of the mappers, were lying along the river of Snagast, and this video confirms that the Russians managed to cross the river of Snagast, and currently the clashes are taken on the Ukrainian side. If the Russians are able to hold their positions and to force the Ukrainians to fall back, then the situation for the Ukrainians is going to become very critical, because there is a very short distance between current Russian positions and the intersection of roads in the area of the village Zhelony Shlях. If the Russians are able to improve their positions until this line, until this intersection of roads, this is going to be the end of Ukrainian Sudzha or Kursk offensive, because some of Ukrainian forces might got encircled by the Russians. As for Glushkova area, we haven't received anything, just a regular activity of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the concentration of Ukrainian forces. So nothing special, just artillery duels. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, share my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.